Good evening. Glad to have you again here at midweek Bible service. Hope you had a good week. I said last week we was going to maybe start on Titus. I didn't say we were. I said maybe. I got to thinking back before all the shutdown started. There was a couple of questions that people had, and we was going to cover those. Well, about the time I was going to cover it, that's when the shutdown happened. I thought this would be a good time to talk about it again next couple of weeks, because we got vacation Bible school in about a week and a half, and I'll take one Wednesday. So we'll probably start Titus after vacation Bible school. But what we're going to look at tonight, one question came about was a topic of foot washing. Is it something that's commanded today, something that we are to do? And because there are those out there in religion that do such. That's how our prayer gets started. John Ross, would you lead some prayer, please? When we think of foot washing, sometimes we think about the New Testament, because that's where we find Jesus when he washed the disciples' feet. But you can also find it in the Old Testament as well. And as in the New, as it is in the Old, it was a expression of hospitality. We don't practice that expression of hospitality, at least not in our culture. But somebody comes into your home, you may say, "Can I take your coat?" Well, that's an expression of hospitality. It may be a hot day, and you'll say to them, "Do you want some bottle of water, or a glass of water, or tea, or something like that?" Well, that's an expression of hospitality. And there's others that everybody does in their own home, showing that. So it was expressions that were shown in the Old Testament and also in the New Testament. In Genesis 18 and verse 4, we find Abraham when he was visited by the angels. He was being told about the birth of Isaac. And look what he says to these angels. "Please let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree." So here the angels were given an opportunity to wash their feet. It wasn't that Abraham was going to wash them. It wasn't he was going to get one of his servants to wash the feet of the angels. He said, "Bring some water." That'll be a servant to bring the water. "And we wash your feet. You wash your feet." So it didn't necessarily have to be done by somebody else. It's according to how I guess, rich you were, what kind of establishment you had in your home, if you had servants or not. If you had servants, it very well would be that they would wash the feet of your guest. Or you could just say, "Well, here's the water, you wash them." It wasn't often that the owner of the household or the man would do the actual washing of the feet of his guest. So here we find in the Old Testament where it is being used. Now, John 13 is where Christ does this, where he washes the apostles' feet or disciples' feet. And the Lord's Supper has just been completed. And we're going to read this, and then we'll have to fill in the blank of something here that's going on, what another writer tells us. John 13, beginning in verse 1. "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, and that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. After supper being ended, the devil having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him." Verse 3. "Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from supper and laid aside his garments, took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with a towel with which he was girded. So here it is after the supper. The Lord's Supper's taking place. There's a conversation going on. We don't know what it is as far as what John tells us, but there's one going on here. And Christ gets up at the appropriate time. He takes the basin, he takes the towel, he takes the water, and he begins to wash their feet. And the question is, why did he do it? Why did he do it? Is it because their feet were just dirty? Is it because their feet were smelling the room up and, well, we got to do something about this? Or did Christ have an additional reason for doing it? What brought it on? And by just reading from John, we don't know what brought it on, what caused him to get up and get the basin and the towel to do this. What we got to do is go to Luke's account, where Luke tells about this, or at least what's going on at this time, and see what caused Christ to do what he did. It's in Luke 22, verses 23 and 24. It says, then they began to question among themselves which one of them who would do this thing. Now there was also a dispute among them as to which of them should be considered the greatest. So Christ, if what we read in chapter 13, Judas had left. Christ just told them, one of you will be betraying me. And that causes this conversation among the disciples. As we see there in verse 23, they were questioning among themselves which one would do this. So they're looking at one another, talking. Well, in this conversation, another question or another conversation comes up. Verse 24, a dispute among them as to which of them should be considered the greatest. So here they are, fussing a little bit, wondering who's going to betray Christ, and all of a sudden it begins to change, the conversation does. Which one is the greatest among us? And you can just sort of see them going back and forth, because this is not the first time that this has happened. If we back up to Luke chapter 9, we'll find one other time, at least, when they were in a dispute over this. 9:46 of Luke. Then a dispute arose among them as to which of them would be greatest. And then in Mark 10:37, and they said, grant us that we may sit one on your right hand and the other on your left in your glory. Then verse 41, then when the 10 heard it, they began to be greatly displeased with James and John. So here we have two occasions when this dispute happened among these men. Who's going to be the greatest? Who's going to be the spokesman? Who's going to be the individual who's going to be in charge of this group? And then in 37 and 41 there, Mark, that's when James and John beat everybody else to the, to Christ. Well, they're discussing it, who's going to be the greatest. That's when James and John says, when you get there, let us be on your right and left hand. And the others didn't like it because they sort of beat them to the punch there. So this, who's the greatest, is what took place. That is what caused Christ to go over and pick up the bowl and the water and the towel. That's what caused him to do this. He's got to teach them a lesson, these 12 men, a lesson here about who is the greatest and what it means to be the greatest, what it means to be a servant. That's what he's going to be teaching here. So here they are, fussing and arguing. And all of a sudden, Christ very quietly gets up, picks up the items, starts washing their feet. And I suspect that he got pretty quiet. Probably you could hear a pin drop. It was so quiet. But we pick it up in verse 3, John 13:3. And Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from supper and laid aside a garment, took a towel and girded himself. So there's what we've already read, but there's when it happens. And I wonder, did Christ feel disappointed right here? Here it is. This is on a Thursday night. He's about to be betrayed. He's about to be carried to that mockery of a trial. The next Friday, he's going to be scourged. He's going to be crucified. He's trying to get focused and get them focused. And here they are fussing over who's going to be the greatest. And did it somewhat discourage him for what they were doing, disappoint him? You know, they should know. They should have more respect. I'm trying to teach them, trying to help them in this. And maybe he felt disappointed over how they were acting here. They missed a point. I know at one time an individual was having surgery, and the family was in the room, and there, pretty severe surgery, major surgery. And they was about to take him out and go to the room with him. And the family was in there, and they got in a dispute over where they were going to go eat lunch while he was in surgery. A pretty good dispute, more so than what you would think. And I wonder what the man thought that was there fixing to go for surgery, and he was hearing all this. He might want to think, what about me? You know, I thought you were here for me, not about where you're going to go out and eat while I was going out for surgery. Another family, they got into a dispute over which way they were going to go to the funeral home in order to see their dad. Which way were they going to go? Were they going to go this way, to the right, or go to the left? How long would it take to get there? A couple of minutes savings. And before they left the home, a great dispute arose just on how they were going to get to the funeral. Now, they're missing the point. Just like the man going for surgery, they missed the point. The disciples here are missing the point. What Christ is about to go through and where they should be focused. And they're fixing to learn a lesson about dying to self, about being a servant. And again, he's not washing their feet just to be polite. And he's not washing their feet because he forgot to do it when they first entered the room. They've been there a while. But he's doing this, showing to them, if you're going to be the greatest, you got to be a servant. That's where he's going with it. Now, verse 6, John 13:6. Then he came to Simon Peter. And Peter said to him, Lord, are you washing my feet? And Jesus answered and said to him, what I am doing to you, or doing you do not understand. What I am doing you do not understand now, but you will after knowing this. Peter said to him, you should never wash my feet. And Jesus answered, if I do not wash your feet or wash you, you have no part with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. So I don't know where Peter was in line, but at some point, Christ gets to him and, you're not washing my feet. No, not you, the Son of God. You're not washing my feet. And Christ says, if I can't wash your feet, you don't have a part with me. And then Peter says, if that be the case, just give me a whole bath. If that be the case, give me a bath. But Peter is going to learn a lesson here about humility. Going to learn a lesson about being a servant. When we think of an apostle that had a lot of pride about him, we often, probably Peter will be the first one that comes to our mind. And yet Peter here has got to get rid of it. He's got to get rid of that pride, that independent attitude that he has, wanting to be the greatest. He's fixed to have to take on the form of a servant in order to be the greatest. Then in verse 12, John 13:12. So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments and sat down again. He said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your teacher, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet." So they didn't understand it. He gets around to all of them. They sit back down. They're talking. "Do you know what I've done?" "Well, yeah, you washed our feet." No, that's not what he's asking. "Do you know why I've done this? What's the purpose of doing this?" Again, to show them with Christ being the teacher and the Lord that he is, and yet look what he's doing. If the teacher would do so, if the Lord would do so, then they are to do so as well. They are to be the ones to wash the feet. Again, the disciples, or apostles here, disciples didn't want to be servants. They want to be the greatest. And the greatest do not wash feet. They don't do it. The greatest do not serve. They have other people that do the serving for them. But here, Christ is showing who he is and what he's about and how they need to learn this. If they're going to serve others, if they're going to be his apostles, they have got to learn to serve and not be served. They got to learn that. And yeah, I'm sure it was difficult for them to do this. At least in the beginning it was. Now, other places that Christ brought this out is in Matthew 20, 27 and 28. "Whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many." So whoever desires to be first, let him be your slave, the one that will serve. Son of Man did not come to serve, but to be served, but to serve. And that's certainly what he did. It's all about humbling ourselves and being able to serve and remembering that in the kingdom of God, in the Lord's church, we're all equal. We're all servants. Nobody has seniority over anybody else, but we're all equal when it comes to our serving one another and serving others. We're all equal in this. In Matthew 23, 11 and 12, "But he who is the greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." Again, another verse showing that we need to serve. You don't be the greatest, you be a servant. And that's a very difficult thing for some people to do, is not only to serve, but there's some who don't want to be served. They just don't want to. And the thing about it, if we can't accept being served, for somebody serving us, then we're going to have difficulty in what Christ has done for us. We're going to have difficulty with that. Because we may come across thinking, well, I'll do it myself. I'll save myself. I'd work out my own salvation. I'd take care of it. But we can't. We're totally dependent on Christ doing it for us, and he has, and for him serving us, taking care of us. So it's a humbling thing to have somebody to serve you. A humbling thing for us to serve others. But yet it's something that Christians are to do. To be that of a servant, because Christ is the one who has given us the example of what we are to do when it comes to serving. So there's the background and why Christ did this. It's because of the being who he was and teaching these apostles, disciples, what they're going to be doing very soon when it comes to serving others. And if they can't, they just well go ahead and get out. Now, what happens at a foot washing service? You'll find those churches that do this, they have different procedures and how they do it. There's no one set procedure. But the few that I've I've read about or talked to about it, this is pretty much their procedure. They will instruct members to come to the service with clean feet and clean footwear. This is announced in advance. They don't want you just to show up and, you got a dirty foot, ingrown toenail, something like that, and it's oozing everywhere, holey socks, stuff like that. They want you to come prepared for this, so they give it notice of it. They remind the women not to wear stockings or pantyhose. The members will go to a designated area, usually the front pew or chairs in the front, and a minister will wash the members' feet. In some churches, the members wash other members' feet. Sometimes they go to a room, just a designated room, and there's where it takes place. And you have an option. You can go if you want to, or if you don't want to, you don't have to go. It's optional. There may be some that would require it, say it's commanded, but in most cases, the few that I've talked to about it, it is optional. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And again, they say it's just a way of humbling themselves to wash somebody else's feet. Another point about it, where members wash other members' feet, usually the men wash the men's feet and the women wash the women's feet. The men will sit on a separate row from the women. So it'd be sort of divided up. I don't know who the woman would be. Don't know. Know who the man might be. Don't know. And in some churches, only one foot is washed. And it doesn't matter which foot. I don't know about that one. Why do they choose one foot over the other one? I don't know. Do you have a choice on which foot? Or they say, oh, this day we're going to have, everybody does the right foot. I don't know how they come up with knowing that. So, if we were to say, we're going to do it right now, how would you feel about taking the old shoes off and socks or whatever? How would you feel about it? But he's teaching the apostles again about being the greatest. If you're going to be the greatest, you got to let go of this who is the greatest. You got to let go of this, trying to, get to the top of the ladder here, trying to promote your own self. You got to humble yourself. And that's what he was teaching them. And I'm sure that they went on for many years, the rest of their life, remembering this night. Oh, this is something that you just don't have happen, and it just fades from your memory. You remember this, especially if you're the one there that's having the feet washed, especially by Jesus. You think about it, would any of us let Jesus wash our feet? Would we? Would we pull them back saying, oh no, Lord, I need to be washing your feet? That's what Peter did. But would any of us let him wash our feet? But he would. He certainly would. But we can't have the pride that God is trying to show us that we got to get rid of. In James 4 and verse 6, but he gives more grace. Therefore, he says, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Then in 4:10, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. So we are to humble ourselves is what we are to do. And then Romans 12 and verse 3. For I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. So be careful. Be careful thinking of how important you are. Remember, we're all in this together. We're all equal in the eyes of God. We do have different roles in the church that God has given to us. But as far as being equal, we're all equal right there from the standpoint of God and His love for us. So is foot washing commanded today? No. We don't find any example of the early church doing it at any time. Even in history, as the historians write, it's not there. No command for it, no example of it. Nothing in history shows it. But it simply was a lesson on humility. Is what he's trying to get across to them. And if Christ would humble himself in this manner to serve, then we should humble ourselves as well to do what we can. Any comment on this? No, I don't know. I know some of the Baptist group does it. Some of the Free Will Baptist groups do it. And I think the Pentecostals do it somewhat. I don't know when it really got started. I don't know. Anything else? All right, we'll conclude here and take up another topic next week. Thanks.